Hello everyone, my name is Akin and I'm here today with 35mm to review the new Canon EOS R5 Mark II. Canon was kind enough to send us this camera for a few days to test out, and after using this camera on a couple projects for photography and videography over the past couple days, here are 10 things I found in the new camera. First is a full-size HDMI port. Having that full-size port beats having the micro and mini ones that has been on Canon cameras for years, where you either need to get a special cable or you need to get a dongle that can easily destroy your port and make it a hassle to connect external peripherals into your camera. This full-size port makes it easy to connect wireless video transmitters, external monitors, or any other peripheral you want to use with the HDMI port. Kudos on that Canon. The second is vents to dissipate air. Overheating was a big issue with Sony cameras until they figured out the way to sort it out, but now it seems to become more and more of a conversation with Canon. On the EOS R5, which is the R5 Mark I, it was a big issue until a firmware update came and fixed it up. On the EOS R5C that was released afterwards, there was a huge fan and vent at the back to prevent it from overheating. Now on the R5 Mark II, there is a vent on the side and there is a vent at the base. The vent at the base takes in air and lets it out through the vents at the side to help with cooling, and Canon even released a new battery grip that has a cooling fan to further help with cooling in this new camera. And while airflow is better on the R5 Mark II and cooling is a lot better thanks to the vent, it can still overheat. In fact, when you turn on the camera and you're in a mode that can overheat, the camera tells you that it's going to display the time remaining in yellow, so that you know that the camera can overheat. And in fact, while recording this Aero, which I'm recording right now on the new R5 Mark II with the Canon 85mm f1.2 RF lens, the camera has indeed overheat, and I had to turn off the camera, wait for the battery to cool down before I continued, and I'd only been recording for like 20 minutes, and I'm recording the 4K fine mode at 24 frames per second. So overheating is still an issue, but it has been taken into cognizance by Canon, thus adding the vent in the R5 Mark II. Next is the buttons have been moved, especially compared to the R5 Mark I. Right now you have two separate buttons. One is the on and off and lock switch, and on the other side you have the photo and video switch, which is a lot faster and more efficient for switching between photo and video modes. Now you no longer have to go into the mode, into the menu, and then switch from photo to video and then all of those steps. Right now with a single button you just switch from photo to video. However, if you're coming from the R5 Mark I, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to, because the on and off button has been crisscrossed to the other side, and it's just going to take a little bit of time for your muscle memory to kick in. The next thing is the addition of waveforms and false color to the EOS R5 Mark II. Now you can use waveforms or false color on the EOS R5 Mark II. I personally prefer to check my exposure with false color because I believe it's a lot more granular, so you're able to dial in your exposure a lot more correctly. But some people prefer waveforms, and both options are now available on the R5 Mark II. However, if you're using manual focus peaking, this is if you turn your lens to manual focus or you're using a manual focus lens on the R5 Mark II, you cannot use manual focus peaking alongside with waveform or false color. Also, you can map a button to manual focus peaking, but you cannot map a button to false color or waveform. You have to go into the menu and do that manually, which I think is a miss on Canon's part, and I feel if a firmware update is released, that can easily fix up the problem. But right now you can only map a button to manual focus peaking, and you have to go into the menu to enable or disable false color or waveform. We have two new codecs that have been brought from the Cine line to the R system. These codecs are typically found in the Canon Cine line, and now we have them on the R5 Mark II. Personally, I prefer to work with these codecs because they return a lot more information, a lot more depth, and I'm happy that they are finally brought here to the R system. Another new addition are new frame rate options and new resolutions. Right now the camera can shoot 8K RAW up to 60 frames per second. If you have been looking for Canon RAW and you cannot spring for the Cine line or the R5C, the R5 Mark II gives you that, and it records it all internally. So you can do 8K RAW up to 60 frames per second. You can do 4K up to 120 frames per second with audio, so you can decide to add audio to that, or you can decide to shoot it confirmed in camera and that will be without audio. So that is very good, especially for wedding videographers. And you can now shoot 2K up to 200 frames per second. So Canon did not skimp out on the resolution and the frame rate this time around. This camera comes packed. However, with the higher frame rate and higher resolutions, you will need to use the faster CF Express cards to be able to record in these resolutions and at this speed internally. I also need to take note that overheating might happen a lot quicker with the faster and higher frame rates, but it's there if you want to use it, and I think that is fantastic. Another addition that I think is very great is the tally light. Right now the R5 Mark II has a red tally light in front that kicks in, 1 whenever you're recording, 2 whenever the camera is overheating, and 3 whenever you have about 6 minutes or less on recording time on your memory card. The light starts to blink, and I think that is really good for people like me that I'm shooting myself right now in front of the camera. You can tell that the camera is recording, or you can tell that you're almost out of storage, or you can tell that your camera is about to overheat, and I think that is great. It's a little addition, but I think it's a wonderful addition. Another fantastic addition to the R5 Mark II is the addition of C-Log 2. A lot of professional colorists have been asking for C-Log 2, which you typically see in the ceiling line of cameras from Canon, and now C-Log 2 is available in the R5 Mark II. And to all the colorists out there, congratulations to you. I personally prefer C-Log 3, easy to grade, quickly get to the point, keep it moving to the next project. But for everyone who loves and has been asking for C-Log 2, C-Log 2 is now available in the R5 Mark II. And the last thing is a new battery. Now this is a mixed bag, because a new camera, new battery, yay, well happy, a little bit more runtime and all of that. But in my experience, that has not necessarily been the case. On one of the projects I was shooting, in about 2 hours of on and off shooting, not continuous 2-hour shooting, of on and off shooting between 4K 120 and 4K 24, I was able to kill the battery in about 2 hours, and I had to plug it in to charge. So it doesn't last significantly longer, at least in my use case. Also, if you are not using the new battery, the LPE6B battery that comes with this new camera, you lose a significant amount of functionality. What do I mean by that? For one, you are only stuck with 25 frames per second. You can't shoot 24, you can't shoot 30, you can't shoot 60, you can't shoot any other frame rate except 25 frames per second. I believe with time there's going to be a firmware update to fix this, but right now that is where it stands. And you know, it just beats me. Why is that? You also lose pre-capture, which is a situation where you hold down the shutter and it takes about 5 seconds of recording before you actually press the shutter to start recording. You lose that as well. But if you have a ton of LPE6 batteries that are used with your R5 Mark I or R6 Mark II, now those batteries cannot give you 100% functionality with this new camera, especially again seeing that the battery does not last significantly longer than the old LPE6 batteries. So it's a mixed bag for me, right? So what it means right now is if you are picking up the R5 Mark II, you have to buy a ton of batteries to use with that, because the battery can die, and once the battery dies, you either have to pop in another LPE6P battery to be able to get the full functionality of the camera, or you have to wait for the battery to recharge, and you know, it just becomes a whole thing. A good thing though is while I was using the camera, I was able to plug it in with the included USB-C straight to power, and I was powering the camera straight from electricity, so that could save you a little bit on battery. But then the question of overheating becomes another thing, because now you're running power through it, then you're taking power from it, and all of that heat dissipation, it becomes a whole other conversation. But in a pinch, if you need to power the camera, you can always plug it directly to electricity through the USB-C port. All in all, what do I think about this? I think this is a terrific camera on both the videography and the photography side of things. For the photography side of things, we teamed up with Lex Ash to do the photography review, and you can check that out on the channel as well. And if you're heavy on the video side of things, this packs a punch. It's going to be an amazing camera, big camera for your C70, C80 that I just released, R5C, C300, C400. I think it's a phenomenal small pocket size cinema camera, and also an amazing stills camera. Thank you so much, Canon, for sending this out to us. We had an amazing time with the camera, using it on different projects, and till we come your way again another time, keep watching 35mm.